Welcome to our continuing YouTube video series on employment law. My name is Christopher Neufeld of Neufeld Legal, and in this particular video we are going to be discussing the concept of sexual harassment in the workplace. So what exactly do we mean when we say there's been sexual harassment in the workplace? Well, what we're talking about is a situation where an employee is subjected to either by their employer, another employee, or party in the workplace or in relation to their job or through the course of their employment to inappropriate, vexatious comments and or conduct against them that pertain to sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression, where that particular type of comment or conduct is either known or ought to reasonably have been known to the individual perpetrating it that it is unwelcome. We can also be talking about an individual making an inappropriate sexual solicitation or advance to another person within the workplace or within the scope of their employment or job. And they are in a position to either confer, grant, or deny a benefit or advancement to that particular individual. And that particular individual who is instigating this solicitation or advance knows or ought to have known under reasonable circumstances that the solicitation or advance is unwelcome by that individual. So if we break out the types of behavior that typically are construed within the ambit of sexual harassment in the workplace and are unwelcome, we typically can look at it into 5 broad areas. And those are spoken words, gestures, the showing of offensive or obscene images and pictures, physical contact, and intimidation. So let's try to approach each of those in order. So first of all, we have the spoken word or even sounds such as whistling or catcalling. So what can this intone in the form of sexual harassment? It can intone the aspect of always talking about sex, telling jokes that pertain to sex or gender roles, whistling or making kissing sounds, catcalling, making sexual comments that are embarrassing, utilizing vulgar and highly inappropriate language, making sexist remarks or insults, questioning somebody's sexual life proclivities in a manner that the other person does not deem appropriate or does not wish to entertain, or making sexual threats or put-downs. Another area is in the area of gestures, where one makes obscene or threatening gestures that pertain to a sexual aspect. There need not be vocalization. The communication that can be achieved through the gestures can be more obscene, inappropriate in certain circumstances than the spoken word at times, such that gestures of themselves can constitute sexual harassment. Similarly, the use of obscene imagery and pictures and items and depictions can constitute sexual harassment, whether it's through explicit photographs, symbols, displaying pornography, whether in imagery off the internet, even leaving imagery on one's video screen, or sharing it with people who might be comfortable with it, but doing it in such a way that other people who might be uncomfortable with it have the potential to see it. It could go so far as to involve the exposure of one's own body, or to show other obscene things, obscene images, obscene suggestions. Next, there is the idea of physical contact, which is particularly pernicious in the sense of whether it's unwanted physical contact or the threat or presumption of physical contact that can of itself constitute sexual harassment. It doesn't have to be so significant as to result in a higher degree of engagement, such that there is an actual sexual activity. Nevertheless, the more significant the engagement, the contact, the more problematic this whole aspect is. Simply brushing up against another person can of itself constitute sexual harassment. But when one continues to take it further and further, the legality, the problems that emanate from this are quite considerable, quite threatening, and something that needs to be addressed promptly and appropriately, given the fact that it can very well escalate from a mere employment matter to very much a criminal matter of sexual assault. And finally, there is the aspect of intimidation. Sexual harassment can pertain to intimidation, where a person is intimidated and they are attempted to be drawn into situations which are not of their liking, which they are uncomfortable with, such as requesting dates, offering or seeking sexual favors, sexual propositions, sexual imagery, clothing choices, all these kind of things. Even asking people to do stuff out of their ordinary cycle which they might not be comfortable with. Asking them to attend events where the intention goes beyond the pure workplace. These are all dangerous aspects which have the potential to lead to even greater aspects which go beyond the employment side and can even get into criminal conduct. So it's actually both important to the person who is being perpetrated against, but also to the person who might need to know that they very well could be considered a perpetrator should their actions go too far, should they not appropriately consider stuff. Because so much of this emphasizes the importance of understanding what your obligations are, especially when you're in a more senior role within the organization. This can mean whether you are an employer, a manager, a supervisor, or just someone from the male sex who has the ability and the potential to intimidate, to harass, to discriminate against another individual because of some sexual or gender aspect. That individuals need to recognize that they can be put into a very adverse situation, and that those situations can be misconstrued. Oftentimes, but that's probably putting it too much onus on the other individual and saying that these people are slighted, but people do not fully appreciate how they can be interpreted and thereupon misinterpreted. And it's highly politically correct society that we live in. Individuals of where there's an imbalance of power need to appreciate that they have to be more in tune with what they are doing in the slightest way, because they can very easily find themselves put offside. That the slightest aspect that they might think is innocent, normal workplace environment can be construed as sexual harassment. And it is a slippery slope to think that people in the first instance, in the second instance, might allow it to pass, that they escalate it. Not really escalate in the sense of trying to be offensive, but thinking that they are okay and in their right. It is important to be extremely careful. And on the flip side, when you are engaged by another individual in your workplace in a manner that could constitute sexual harassment, you do need to take appropriate steps to protect yourself and to deal with those matters. And naturally, every situation is heavily dependent upon the particular facts and circumstances that exist. And it is with that you need to engage with knowledgeable professional counsel and understand what the situation is. So as addressed properly, appropriately, and most importantly, safely for yourself, because your safety is critical. Even beyond your continued work there, your safety is of the utmost importance. So you have to address all these many aspects in the scope also of the facts and circumstances that you are dealing with. So we've touched upon many aspects of what sexual harassment in the workplace constitutes. Even though we've spoken for quite some time, it is only touching upon the very surface of this very important, delicate, and expansive concept and reality that we live in today's day and age. So I trust this has provided you with some insight, but it is only the beginning. And there is much more that you need to address should this be something that you believe is of impact to yourself in one way or the other. Thank you very much.